This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
Hello, thank you so much for listening to Raising Me. This is a podcast where we get into the highs and lows of parenting and really everything in between. I'm Adrienne Stein, a mom of 3 ranging in age from 6.5 to 17. I'm also a longtime journalist. And today we are talking about college, the eye-opening costs and ways to offset these costs, whether you've been saving for years or maybe you're just getting started. A big thank you also to our sponsor, Maine Health. College is right around the corner in my house for my oldest, but it also at least feels like a long way away for my youngest in kindergarten. So this is a both right now and an in the future situation for my family. I often joke that my husband and I will be paying tuition for the rest of our lives, though actually I'm not sure how much of a joke it is. It is, though I will say a very exciting time as we're going on college tours and trying to figure out the right fit. But I gotta tell you, if you haven't looked at the price tag lately, I mean, wow, 40, 50, 60, and more, $1,000 per year. It is wild. And of course, that can feel very overwhelming. So when should you start saving? How much should you save or already have saved? And is it ever too late to start? By the way, it is not, so please give yourself a break if you haven't started yet. If you're feeling stressed out about this, I'm going to tell you, you're not alone. We have Mila Tappan, the College Access and Outreach Manager from FAME, that's the Finance Authority of Maine, with us. She's going to share some really great strategies for paying for school, saving, financial aid, and even some scholarship pro tips regardless of where you are in this journey, so check it out. Well, Mila, thank you for coming back and being with us today. First and foremost, let's just talk about why you feel so passionate about this topic.
I feel so passionate about this topic because we want to be sure that students and their families have the best options that they can to pursue higher education, however that looks. And, we're really supportive of all different types of pathways. But many of those pathways do require some financial investment. So I want to be sure that families kind of know in advance what to expect. I want them to know how to get prepared, because this should be a wonderfully exciting experience. But I know sometimes it can be kind of stressful.
Let's talk about that stressful part, because we are in the thick of it at my house. We have a junior who, is in her second semester of junior year. So we're starting to look at schools. And we had talked about this before. And my only context was when my husband and I went to school. And when I saw the price tag on some of these schools, I was like, wait, what? This is for each year, not the entire thing? If for parents who are listening to this, whether your kid is in kindergarten or, in high school, like my oldest is, it's sticker shock. It has changed so much.
It really is. I'm going to date myself here, but I went to the University of Maine back in the mid-late 80s. I remember my tuition was $1,500 a year. I could work enough in the summer waiting tables to save that up and pay for that out of pocket. So the reality is that yes, college has gotten more expensive. There's no doubt about it. That being said, there are so many options available though. So it's not like the only options are schools that are really, really expensive. And also, even those schools that are really expensive, what we want to look at is the net price of a school, not the sticker price of a school. And so that's a lot of the information that I want to share with families is how do you kind of figure out what a school is really going to cost you? So kind of let's put those sticker prices aside a little bit and, think about what we can do to get that sticker price lower.
Well, okay. So let's talk about sticker price because it isn't just private schools either, because some of the public universities are, 30, 40, $50,000 a year. And so, I'll just speak from experiences. We're looking at these and we have heard, through talking to you, but then also anecdotally through other parents who've gone through the process.
Mhm.
Wait, don't necessarily look at what that sticker price is because sometimes private schools have more money to give than
Yeah.
public schools. And that's all great, but that also then makes it a little bit confusing and overwhelming when you're just starting the process. Well, should I look at
Mhm.
this school? Because maybe it isn't $85,000 a year. Maybe it is more in line with I'm using that as an extreme example, but it actually is not that
No,
extreme.
there are schools that are that much money these
Yes.
days. My approach, and I think you and I have chatted about this, I've got two kids of my own. Somehow they're 30 and 25. So I'm beyond
Somehow.
this. Yes. But what I said to my kids, especially my first one, when we went through this process, I did say, let's look at all schools.
Mhm.
Let's be open to what schools are available. But I also, because of having done this work, and let me just say really quickly related to the stress, I was stressed myself. I am never stressed when I'm working with other families in terms of navigating the process or, trying to figure out options. But when it was my own kiddo, I did definitely feel a level of stress. So I want you to know that one of the things here at FAME that we can do, or I can do, any of us can do at FAME, is just work with families to try to relieve some of that stress because we do understand that. And we want to share, whatever we can do to make this easier. But when going through the process, I did say to him, let's look at all schools, but I was also very upfront about which ones we can afford. And there is really good news that there is information out there that can help families figure out, kind of the what we call the net price, not just the sticker price. So there are definite tools that we can go into and talk about that. So I think that we want students to find schools that are going to be a good fit for them, both financially and academically. We need them to succeed. I mean, we're investing a lot of money. We want it to be a good experience and a good fit for the students. So that's really important. But at the same time, there is research needed. We do need to look at a variety of schools. We've got to have a variety of schools on that list so that families have good options available. There are multiple pathways, there are multiple good options, but at the end of the day, we want to be sure that every family has options that work for them.
So when do you recommend, and maybe it's as soon as baby is born, but when do you recommend that families really start getting serious about saving for college?
I'm going to say as soon as babies are born.
Okay,
And
right.
the reason I'm going to say that is not because I think that most families have money available when babies are born. It's very expensive to have a baby, and usually families don't have a lot of extra money. But I love the idea of setting up a college savings plan as soon as a baby is born. And we're really lucky here in Maine. Every baby born a Maine resident is eligible for the $500 Alphon grant. So we've already got a nice little head start on that for all families. But I would love to have families set up a college savings plan of some sort, as much so that not only that they contribute if they can, but so other family members can, other friends can. It can be even, to be honest with you, before the baby's born. What a great baby shower gift. What great gifts for the baby's first birthday and, other holidays when they don't even know what gifts are yet. So the earlier people can start, the better. But I really want them to think about that being a family affair or a community affair rather than the whole responsibility, being on the parents themselves to be saving for higher education.
And I mean, that all sounds great. And that is ideal. Of
Very
course, time is on
right,
your side when baby
right,
is first born.
right.
But what about for those who are like, excuse me, I have a
Yeah,
middle schooler or
yeah,
my child just started high school. How do you ease their
right.
concern, stress, panic
Mhm.
at this point?
Yeah,
Or, how would they best get started now? Sort
right,
of better
right.
late than never, essentially.
So I really love to think about paying for higher ed as a piecemeal approach. So, what we want to do, and we can talk about the individual pieces, savings being one of them, but I love this concept of let's not rely on one or two sources of funding to pay for our higher ed. No one can save enough. Or most families that I know certainly cannot save enough to pay for higher education out of pocket. We know we can't be 100% reliant on the schools to give people everything they need. So this piecemeal approach is where we have as many pieces as possible, many sources of funding as possible to help pay for higher education. So the analogy I love is the pie analogy. I love my Thanksgiving pumpkin pie. And, if I cut my pumpkin pie into two pieces, that's great for Thanksgiving evening and having two pieces of pie. But when it comes to higher ed, I don't want just two pieces. I want as many pieces as possible. Like if I have 8 different sources of funding, for example, no one piece needs to be as large. So that's going to be the first conversation I'm going to have with a family if they've got a middle schooler or a high schooler, is let's sit down now and talk about what possible pieces are available for your family. And let's be sure that we've got as many pieces as we can. And we're doing the things to make sure those sources of funding are available.
So what would those pieces be? Like, how do we make up that pie?
Yeah. So savings is absolutely one of them. And the one that I want families to think about as early as possible, because, again, time being on your side, there's some great savings programs available. We have a 529 program here in Maine. That's one way to save for higher education. There's matching grants available. So I'd love to have people check that out. But however people find the best way to save, that's wonderful. Some other pieces are things like knowing about merit aid. So when kids are starting high school, we talk about grades matter. Where they really matter not only is to get into a particular college, but a lot of colleges offer some merit money. And so what merit scholarships are scholarships that are based on the student themselves, kind of what they bring to the table. So there are schools out there, this is not the case with every school, but there are many schools out there that offer merit money to students that have a certain GPA. It's not as much about test scores as it used to be, but it's really GPA based. And that admissions office says, you know what, not only do we really want you to come to this school, so we're going to admit you, but we're going to offer you some merit money to make that possible. So, not putting too much pressure on kiddos, but knowing that grades do indeed matter.
And that would be, though, based on the individual school. Like it's not,
Right.
Hey, the 3.8, you're definitely getting money across the board.
Right, exactly.
You might get more money for a 3.8 at one school than you would, or a 4.0 or whatever it might be at another.
Right. So that's why I'm not necessarily thinking that, you want to say, okay, you've got to have this particular GPA. I think it's just that message that you just want to do the best that you possibly can. And to know that, different schools are going to theoretically provide some money for that. So, it is different by school. It does definitely vary by school. To be honest, it will vary at one school from year to year. And schools are not particularly transparent about this. So that makes it even a little bit more challenging. So
wait a minute. You might get like, say, $10,000 one year and not the next?
No, I think it's more that they might change the criteria for incoming students. So, I think, once they've said to a particular student, you're going to be eligible for X, Y, Z in a merit scholarship, as long as you keep your GPA up, they're going to honor that. But the next year, the criteria might be a little bit different. So it's really just about knowing that grades do matter, students doing the best that they can possibly do, and just know that that is one of those many sources of the funding higher education. That's one of those piecemeal approaches. Another one are scholarships. So students at any point in time can start researching scholarships. There's a lot of organizations out there that want to give money to students to help them pursue higher education. So doing that research early, building up that list, just so that, when you come into senior year, you've got, let's say, 10 or 12 scholarships that look like they're a really good fit, that you meet their criteria, so that when the time comes for them to be applied for, students are ready to go and they know exactly what they need to do.
So scholarships, it's prepping your junior year or so, but actually applying more like in your senior year.
I would say for the vast majority.
Yeah.
Now, that does not mean that there are not scholarships that sometimes can be applied for earlier. So, scholarships come in all sorts of different flavors. So they have all sorts of different criteria. So there are scholarships that students can be awarded before when they are younger, but most of them it's going to be senior year when they're going to start applying.
So we talked about savings is one of the pieces. We talked about money from colleges is one of the pieces, specifically merit aid, and also there are scholarships. What about like need-based financial
Yeah,
aid? That would come from the college
right.
also, correct?
Right. So that's a huge one. And to
Yeah.
be honest with you, that's probably for many families the biggest piece of the pie. So when students are approaching senior year, they are going to be building their list of schools and they're going to be figuring out what they have to do to apply for need-based aid. That's the aid that's through the financial aid office. So a moment ago, we talked about merit scholarships, and it's usually the admissions office that awards those. The financial aid office is going to focus in on that need-based aid. And in order to receive need-based aid, families need to fill out an application. So the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, is the application that we want to be sure every single high school senior completes, because that is the form to apply for federal financial aid, and it's the form that's used to apply for state financial aid, the Maine state grant here in Maine. So that's a given. And then we want students to check to see if anything else is required. So some schools, particularly private schools that have a lot of their own money, require an additional form called the CSS profile. And so that form does go into a bit more detail where the FAFSA has gotten so simple and so easy. The CSS profile does want more information about a family, but it's because the schools that use that typically have a lot of money available, meaning that some students might receive, $40,000, $50,000 per year from an individual school. It can happen. Now, again, these often are very expensive schools, but there is a lot of financial aid, need-based financial aid available from those schools.
So not, please forgive if I sound like a total idiot,
Oh, gosh,
but
no.
do you have to fill that out for every school, or is it like kind of a blanket form that you can then submit the form to every school?
Yeah, so thank goodness. No,
Okay.
It's the FAFSA. When you fill out the FAFSA, students will list any school that they're even contemplating. Okay,
Got
so
it.
it's not even schools that they've applied to yet. We want them to put on any school that's even a possibility. With the CSS profile, it's the same way. They will list all of the schools on that one application, and that will be sent to all of the individual schools. So it's kind of like if you think about on the admission side, the Common App, where you fill out and you answer, all of these questions, and they go to all of the schools that you list. These forms work very much the same way. One form, answer all the questions, list the schools you want it sent to, and it gets sent to all of them.
So, but is there a way though, before you apply to all these schools, to kind of estimate the true cost, or do you have to go through the whole process to then get a sense of what the true cost would be?
Nothing feels better than feeling your best, which is why Maine Health continues to provide Northern New England with the best network of people, programs, and resources working to help you be your healthiest self. And by doing so, we're creating different paths and giving you options in personal wellness. That's health and care in harmony. That's Maine Health. To learn more, go to mainehealth.org/harmony.
Really good news on that front, that you can get some insight as to what the school is going to cost you before you ever apply to that school. This was not as much the case even 10, 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of things that I would like families to do to get started. And first, I'm going to go into the weeds just a tad and talk about how schools award that need-based aid. So what schools basically do is they say, hey, this is how much it costs to go here. And when schools are estimating their cost, they're really looking at everything: tuition, fees, books and supplies, housing, food, transportation, all of that. Okay. So when you see some of those prices, it is taking into account all of those things. So schools say, this is how much our school costs. And this is how much the FAFSA or the CSS profile theoretically thinks the family can contribute. So they take the cost of the school minus the family's, student aid index or contribution, and what's left is what a school is going to try to fill. If we lived in a perfect world, which we know we don't, but if we lived in a perfect world, every school would fill all of a family's need. So then you wouldn't be having to make these financial decisions, right? You would say, okay, doesn't matter where we go, we're going to pay what they think we can, and then the school's going to make up the rest. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to find those schools that do the best job of meeting the need that a family has, okay? So if we have a school, that's $70,000 per year, and they think the family can come up with 20 based on the FAFSA or the CSS profile, that means that the student's got $50,000 in need. We're looking for a school that can do, a really good job and theoretically meet all of that. You can find out how good a job schools do meeting that need. Okay. And here's how you do it.
I'm taking notes, Mila. Yes. Continue.
And I'm available after this. I want everyone to use the Big Future website. So people are probably familiar with the College Board. The College Board are the SAT people, the AP people, but they also have a college search. So Big Future is a college search within the College Board's website. And one thing that people can do when they are looking for schools is they can go to this website where there are like more than 4,000 colleges listed. So it has, all of the schools that we tend to think of, the 4-year schools and even a lot of the 2-year schools. And what it does is it provides criteria so that you can narrow down those 4,000 schools to schools that meet your needs. So we're going to think about the obvious things, the major, the location, the size of the schools. Those are all three really big things that I think matter a lot to families. But then there's this criteria called affordability. So if you use that criteria, you can say, I only want to see the schools that meet 100% of our need. Okay. And I'm going to be honest with families. That list is not going to be incredibly long. Okay. But maybe I want to see the schools. And this is what I said to my kids. Let's look for schools that meet at least 90% of that need. So, once we go and we apply, they figure out what we can come up with. We have X number of dollars of need. Let's find schools that do a good job of meeting most of that need at least. So that's one of the first things I'd love to have people do. And it doesn't mean that I would exclude a school that doesn't, meet a certain percentage of need, because the reality is that that getting merit aid might override that. These are averages, but I think it's a good place to start. You're not making decisions based on that. But if you can at least kind of get a sense of, okay, this is a school that has really good financial aid, I'm going to go ahead. I do want to pursue this school. They're really expensive, but on paper, they do seem to do a good job of filling the need that families have. So I think it's an important place to start and a piece of the criteria, mainly to build that list of schools, which I think is incredibly important to come into senior year with, let's say, 5 to 10 schools that seem like they're a really good fit for that particular student. Okay. So that's one way. Once you have a school that you think is, okay, this looks like a school that I'm really interested in. Maybe it's because I've done my search on the Big Future website, or maybe it's just a school that my kid has always been interested in. You can go directly to the school's website. Usually you're going to find this on the financial aid page, but you're looking for their net price calculator. Okay. So a net price calculator is something that schools are required to have. They get federal financial aid funds, which most schools do. And what you do is you put in your specific information, so your family's information, things like your income, number of people in your family, things like that. And the school's going to take your information and they're going to take their information and they're going to provide you with an estimate of how much that school is going to cost your student for that first year.
Oh, that's
That
that's
is a real
great.
game changer, right? So
Yeah.
the future can help you kind of get a group of schools, but then to get that individual information that should be more accurate, because again, it's based on your specific situation. That's the great next step.
Okay, and
So,
that's called the net price calculator found on whatever school you're looking at. They'll
yes,
have that on there. Oh, that's
yes.
great.
And
That's a pro
I
tip
think,
right there.
yes, it's usually going to be on the financial aid page, but I find that every website's a little bit different. So you can just go to the homepage and type in net price calculator,
Okay.
and you can get that information. Now, it is an estimate, so I don't want people to make a decision on it. So if
Right.
you
Don't write the check.
don't,
Right.
no, not yet, not yet. You want to wait till you get that official financial aid offer, which won't come until spring of senior year. But it does allow you to gather a lot more information so that you can, again, find those schools that meet all the various criteria and appear to be schools that could be financially affordable.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I got to tell you, like, going through this with my old, now by the time my third is ready to go, well, by the time my third is ready to go to college, it'll probably all change again. But, it's like sometimes we stare at the page, like, where do we start?
Yes,
So
yes.
I know there's also, when you talk about, again, going back to the pie and we
Mhm,
have the
mhm.
savings, the money from the colleges and the scholarships,
Right.
there is a way to do a tuition payment plan as
Yes,
well. And that could be a piece of it, figuring out sort of what you could
right.
afford on a monthly
Mhm.
basis. How does
That's
that work?
exactly Yeah, that's exactly right. So if I have a family that I can get to, again, middle school or high school in particular, but it's again never too late to think about this. So a tuition payment plan is just allows a family to write a check on a monthly basis to help pay a portion of the bill. So when we're talking about a tuition payment plan, first of all, you can use it to cover more than just tuition. We call it that, but literally you can use it to also pay on campus housing and things like that. So the way that I approached it when my kids were in school is I just said, okay, we're going to have a balance. But what I did before that is I stepped back to say, okay, how can I take a look at our family budget and find a way to have some money so that I can make a monthly payment. Because with a tuition payment plan, what it allows you to do is to make payments over the course of several months instead of writing that big check or whatever size check once or twice a year. So it allows you to spread it out over a series of months. It's not a loan, so you're not paying interest on it, although there is typically an enrollment fee, but it's usually pretty minimal.
But just to go stop there for just a second. There's no interest on it. I mean, I think
No
that's
interest rates.
key.
This is
Yeah.
not a loan.
Yeah.
So that's one of the
Right.
things I love about these plans.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not looking at a tuition payment plan to pay the whole remaining balance. It is a piece,
Right.
theoretically, in conjunction with these other pieces. But one of the things I tried to do when I was going through this the first time is I'm looking at my car and I'm thinking about, okay, when is my car paid off? Can we get our car to last a few extra years? So instead of having a car payment, I can take some of that money and I can put it into a tuition payment plan. Or another example might be that families who are contributing to their college savings plan, let's say we're putting in X number of dollars per month into a college savings plan, we can divert that money from the college savings plan or a portion of it into a tuition payment plan, right? So I think it's really just stopping to say, okay, what are we spending our money on? And we know money is tight for everybody and really tight for some families. And they may feel like there is no extra. But what I want people to realize is even being able to make small two-way tuition payment plans, that's a good thing. That's another piece of that pie. So it's really just stepping back, especially if you've got time on your side, to evaluate your expenses. I mean, it could be things as I don't know about all of you. I have too many subscriptions right now. So I subscribe to all of these streaming services.
Oh
I
yeah.
need, I need to reevaluate. Well, if I reevaluate and I can cut out, $100 worth of subscriptions, then I've got money that I can use for a tuition payment plan.
Right.
Guess what? I had boys. I think you have both.
Mhm.
But they ate a lot, right? My grocery bill went down my oldest headed off to college. So it's really just looking holistically at what you're spending money on and trying to figure out where you can save some money so that you can put that money into a tuition payment plan as one of hopefully several pieces that are funding higher education.
So another piece of that pie that we keep going back to could be private education loans. When would that be a good idea, and what exactly would be involved in that? Like, what should parents look for when they're considering adding that into this pie?
Yeah, well, I think that when students apply for need-based financial aid through the FAFSA, they are going to be eligible for some loans on their own. So a direct student loan is something that is part of a financial aid package at most schools. The challenge is that the amount that a student can borrow is relatively minimal, especially compared to the cost of some schools. $5,500 is the amount that is offered to most first-year students. So that I kind of think of separately. It is a loan that does have to be repaid. If a family can get by without having to borrow any more than that, I think that's wonderful. But realistically, I talk to a lot of families where even after they've done all of these other things, they're still a little bit short. So educational loans are available to help families pay for some of that remaining balance or all of that remaining balance if that's the path that they choose. So there are lenders out there, and some of them might be your local credit union, that offer private educational loans. There are also a bunch of national lenders, whether it be, the Sallie Mae's that people have heard of, or Wells Fargo or Discover. Here in Maine, we also have something called the Maine Loan, and in full disclosure, we administer that at FAME. That is the state legislature put this together. It is funded through state bonds, but it's an option that's available. But
do you have to go to a Maine school, or is you're a Maine resident?
Yeah, you just have to be either a Maine resident going to school anywhere that's accredited. It does need to be an accredited school. Or you can be an out-of-state student coming to a Maine school, okay?
Sure.
The thing about the Maine loan and virtually all other types of these private educational loans is there is a credit component to them. So students cannot get these loans on their own. And that's why I first wanted to mention the direct student loans that students get as a result of filing their FAFSA, because those loans students can get on their own. There is no credit component, okay? But for everything above and beyond that, there is going to be a credit component. So students, are going to need a cosigner. Now, it doesn't have to be parents. It can be grandparents. It can be family friends. It can be aunts. It can be uncles. But a cosigner, a credit-worthy cosigner is going to be required. Because one of the things I like families just to think about when they're thinking about these loans is, there's no collateral against them, right? It's not like because sometimes people say to me, well, my kid can go get a loan for a car, but the car is the collateral. And for these loans, there's not that. So that is a requirement of all of these various loans, is that students do have that credit-worthy cosigner. So parents knowing that in advance, when they get to the point of they do want to borrow these sorts of loans, we can help them figure out which options might be the best one for them. But I just want them to know that the students cannot borrow all this money on their own, because people are surprised by that sometimes. They assume students can borrow it all themselves, and they cannot.
And who wants to saddle a student with that kind of debt coming out of school? Like, it is debilitating what some kids are coming out of school with, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. It's crazy. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and that's why we want families to know that there's all sorts of options available. That is not the only option. Is if my kid's going to go to college, that my kid is going to go way into debt. So whether it's they look at a variety of schools, some of which are less expensive to start with, or again, the schools that are expensive but have really good financial aid to make that possible. And I think students also want to consider, what are they going to be doing after college? Mm-hmm. So one of the things that and this is just my own personal decision, our family decision, we felt like federal student loans were okay, because even borrowing the max amount of federal student loans, was going to mean debt, within around the 20, I think it was 25,000 or so that my son borrowed. We felt like that was okay. He, as long as he finished school, which he did, thankfully, and got a job, that the return on investment made sense there. And this return on investment is something that I think we need to give a lot more thought to. But when you start borrowing hundreds of thousands of dollars, oh gosh, you've got to be earning really good money to make that manageable. So instead, I think we need to think about, okay, do we have students that are going down a pathway where they're going to not earn as much money? In that case, it's even more critical that the debt is minimized as much as possible. And so that might be from, going to a community college to start. Community colleges offer an amazing array of programs. So even students and some students they want to pursue just that 2-year degree, and that's great. We need people doing all sorts of things. But for students who want to pursue a 4-year degree, there's some great transfer agreements that exist now with our community colleges and our 4-year institution, both in-state and out. So that's one option to keep the cost down. But that's where I think, coming back to kind of where we started, really doing that research early on to find those schools that have either really good merit aid, which is harder to figure out, that's literally talking to the schools, or have that really good need-based aid, which is what that College Board Big Future site can help people determine.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm taking from this too is just having those conversations with the kids about, yes, this all looks like it's a country club for students and it's an amazing school. And yes, it costs $80,000, but what happens next? Because some of these schools we've visited, some of them, I'm like, this is amazing. And it truly, it looks and feels like a country club for students. And that is reflected in the price, right? 100%. But it's what happens afterwards. Right. What is your career path? What is it? What makes it worthwhile? So, just if you could speak to that and helping parents, helping their kids, making these more financially sound decisions when it comes to selecting a college, because there's a lot of pressure to we can go to another, what about the Instagram? What about the Facebook? And making sure, because everybody wants to have the shiniest place where they went to school. That's a whole nother podcast episode, but
it absolutely is. And that's why, I feel like I'm glad I went through it myself, because I do remember that pressure. Mm-hmm. I do remember how that felt. I used to call it the bumper sticker mentality. What bumper sticker do we get to put on our car, right? And I just think so badly we've got to step away from that and to realize that there are so many places where students can get a great education. And that's what it's about. I never wanted my kids or any of the young people in my life, I don't want the best part of their life to be college, right? I want them to have a good college experience. I want them to have fun. I want them to get a great education. But I want them, once they've graduated, to be able to do all of those things that are so important to so many people. I want them to have the freedom to have kids, to buy a house, to take vacations. And so I think, finding that right balance, and it is achievable. But I think giving in to the pressure, and I am not negating how strong that pressure is, but I think giving into the pressure of we're going to let our kid go anywhere they want to go, regardless of the price, is not the answer. And I equate it back to my kids when they were little sometimes wanted something that I didn't think was in their best interest. Maybe it was the soda. Maybe it was staying up way after bedtime. And as parents, it was really hard. I'd prefer to just give them what they wanted, but I knew I couldn't. I knew that to do the best thing for my kid, what I needed to do was to say no and to say, nope, we're going to do this or we're going to do that. And I don't think sometimes it's that different when it comes to some of these higher ed decisions. I think we have to work with them and, have good options available. But I think at the same time, I felt like I was doing, I think, my kid a favor when I said to him, this is what we can afford. And if it doesn't fit into that, we're not going to be able to make that possible. So, I did have that conversation with him, and I strongly recommend that families have that conversation. It's hard to talk about money. It's really hard to talk about money. But I think to be able to be honest and say, this is what we can do. This is what we expect of you. This is what you can expect from us. And I am going to tell you, my son did not go where he wanted to his senior year because it wasn't going to fit into what we thought was affordable. He went somewhere else, had a great year, transferred to another school that worked out really, really well. It all, at the end of the day, things do tend to work out sometimes, even when we're not sure. But I just think as parents, we've got to think long term. We've got to think about, not only does my kid want this in this moment, and this is what I want to do to make them happy, but I want to be able to, 10 years after they graduate, know that they're in a really good place financially.
Oh, such a good point.
Yeah, but it's hard. I am never going to sit here and say that's easy. But I think if we can do that, but I think it all starts with having those conversations. What are our expectations of our kids? So, in terms of their grades, in terms of their time commitment to searching for scholarships, in terms of them working and what their expectation is, our expectation of them. I joke about my oldest son. He was that kid in high school who had spent his paycheck before he worked the hours, It took a long time. He now has a budget and everything's fine, but it took a bit to get there. So talking about those things and being on the same page and doing that as early as possible, I think is really helpful, because senior year does get pretty emotional. There's a lot going on. Oh, and it's just, so I think any of the conversations that you can have ahead of time, the expectations that you can set up both ways ahead of time, just make that part a little bit easier.
Mila, if there was one thing we could do today, like, what is the key takeaway that every parent should walk away from this conversation with?
Mm-hmm. Gosh, I do think it's talking about it. I think it's talking about it, but talking about it really honestly. And for parents not to feel ashamed or not to feel like they're a failure if they have to set some ground rules, because I think that there probably need to be some of those, but simultaneously supporting our students to help them find the multiple options that exist. There are so many, their careers are not going to be as a result of only attending this one institution. There are so many good schools out there. And I think just helping students to see that. Obviously, if families can, if they have the ability to go and to visit campuses, I think that's wonderful too. I've seen students who had their heart set on a particular school, and then they walked on that campus and they're like, this isn't where I want to be. So I just think that legwork ahead of time, the conversations, the research, all of that just sets families up to be in a better position. And the earlier you can start that, the better. But at the same time, I would say that even for those families that are kind of late in the game, it's not too late. And you can start having these conversations today. And I also want families to just reach out to whether it's us at FAME or to others that have either been through this, or this is what we do for work, to know that there is support and we can help you navigate this process.
I love it. Mila, thank you so much. I also want to mention we'll have additional resources on our website, wgme.com/raisingme. This is huge. Mila, thank you so much.
You are very welcome. Anytime.
Of course, a big thank you to Mila. And we covered a lot today, but hopefully you're walking away feeling at least a little more confident about tackling those college costs, regardless of where you are in the process, whether it's with, younger kids still years away, or maybe it's with your teen who will be heading off to school sooner than we even want to admit. Thank you so much to our sponsor, Maine Health, and to you for listening to Raising Me. I'm Adrienne Stein. This episode is edited by Megan Littlefield and produced with Nate Eldridge. Please follow Raising Me wherever you get your podcasts, and consider a positive rating and review so others can find the message as well. Wherever you are, I hope you learned something new and get to take a little time for you.